Hello, students. Welcome back to the use of English and communication skills with Dr. Aluya. I hope that you found the first lesson on effective communication useful. Today, we are going to the second lesson of the series on the use of English and communication skills, and we are going to be looking at the topic types, uses, and purposes of communication. At the end of this lesson, you should be able to discuss the types, uses, and purposes of communication. I want you to pay attention to the lesson so that you will be able to attempt the practice questions at the end. I'll go straight to the lesson now. There are many types of communication, but for the purpose of this lesson, we are going to consider 5 types of communication. The first is intrapersonal communication. The word intra is a prefix signifying within. Intrapersonal communication is the type of communication that takes place within a communicator. It means that the communicator or speaker communicates with himself. Some features of the intrapersonal communication include the following. One, it involves a single communicator. Number two, the communicator serves as the sender and receiver of the message. Number three, the communicator gives and receives feedback. Four, the channel of communication is the brain. And number five, feedback in intrapersonal communication is internal. I'll go straight to the second type of communication, which is the interpersonal communication. What is the interpersonal communication? This is the type of communication between two speakers who are closely related. Some features of the interpersonal communication include the following. One, all elements of the communication process are actively involved. Recall in our last lesson, we mentioned that the elements of the communication process include the sender, the message, the channel, the receiver, and feedback. In interpersonal communication, all these elements of the communication process are actively engaged. The sender initiates the communication acts. The information that is transmitted to the receiver is referred to as the message. The medium through which the message is transmitted to the receiver is referred to as the channel, and the response or reaction which the receiver sends back to the sender is referred to as the feedback. From this, it can be seen that all elements of the communication process are actively involved in the interpersonal communication. The second feature is that feedback is immediate. The sender receives an instantaneous reply or response from the receiver. The third is that there is overlapping role between the speaker and the listener. In other words, both the speaker and the listener can serve as the sender and the receiver of the message. The third type of communication is called a small group communication. This is the type of communication where a group of people come together to achieve a particular task. An example of this type of communication is a tutorial group where students meet together to discuss a particular topic or to execute a task that may have been assigned to them by their lecturers. What are some of the features of the small group communication? The first is that the small group communication employs the channels of sight and sound. Number two is that it is a structured type of communication as roles are assigned to members of the group. Number three is that members assume various communication roles. They can act as senders and receivers of the message. Number four feature is that there is a leader who coordinates the communication process. Number five is that the setting of small group communication is formal. And lastly, feedback in small group communication is more robust. The next type of communication is the public communication. This is the type of communication where a speaker communicates with a large audience. Examples of the public communication include public speeches, addresses, lectures, and presentations. Some features of this type of communication include the setting is formal, the message delivery follows a pattern and sequence. Then this is a type of communication that involves research. In other words, the communicator is required to obtain some vital information about the audience. Another feature of the public communication is that the feedback is formal as it comes in form of questions at the end of the presentation. Okay, then we'll go straight to the last type of communication, which is the mass communication. This is a type of communication where technologically mediated channels are deployed in transmitting messages to a large audience. An example of this type of communication includes the use of television, radio, newspapers, and magazines. What are some of the features of the mass communication? Some include one, feedback is limited. This is because not every receiver can get their views across to the media outfit. Number two feature is that the mass communication employs a language that is accessible to the audience. The number three is that messages in mass communication are created by a number of individuals ranging from editors, writers, columnists, and correspondents. And lastly, it is a type of communication that is mediated by technology. Before I go to the uses of communication, I would like to add that as part of the features of mass communication, the channels of mass communication are sight and sound. Now, I'll go straight to uses of communication. What are some of the uses of communication? When we talk about the uses of communication, this refers to what we use communication for. Okay? Now, communication can be used for any of the following. Number one is that it is used to entertain. Um, it is used in the entertainment industry where communication is used as a tool to entertain a large audience. Number two uses is that it is used to warn. Communication is used to warn others of dangers or the consequence of taking a particular action. Number three is that it is used to instruct. This can be seen in educational context where communication is used as a tool to pass information across. The number four is that communication can be used to deliberate. Here, it is used as a tool in examining an issue, assessing a situation, or taking a decision. The number five is that communication is used to educate. Communication is the main tool for giving lectures, formal instructions, and training. And lastly, communication is used to persuade. This can be seen in situations where humans use communication as a tool to influence others or to change their opinions. We'll go straight to the purposes of communication. The purposes of communication refers to the intended result of communication. Okay, now what are some of the purposes of communication? Number one is survival. As human beings, we need the basic necessities of life in order to survive. Without communication, we can hardly have access to these basic necessities of life. Number two is that uh, number two is for the establishment and sustenance of relationship. On daily basis, as human beings, we go out and meet with different people rather. As we meet with these people, we establish a social relationship with them. The tool that is used in establishing this social relationship is known as communication. And lastly is for coordination. Through communication, human activities are coordinated in several contexts. I must mention here that communication is the tool that is used for governance. We'll go straight to the practice question now. Please listen carefully to the following questions and pick the right answer to each of uh, the options supplied. Question number one. One of the following is not a feature of intrapersonal communication. A. The use of sight and sound. B. Response is internal. C. Communication. The communicator gives and receives feedback. D. The brain is the medium of communication. Question number two, the type of communication where message and feedback are immediate is dash. A. Interpersonal communication. B. Intrapersonal communication. C. Mass communication. D. Public communication. Question number three, a tutorial section where students meet for a common goal is an example of which type of communication? A. Intrapersonal communication. B. Interpersonal communication. C. Mass communication. D. Public communication. Question number four, dash is a type of communication where a leader coordinates the communication process. A. Interpersonal communication. B. Public communication. C. Mass communication. D. Small group communication. Question number five. A public speech is a best example of which type of communication? A. Public communication. B. Mass communication. C. Small group communication. D. Intrapersonal communication. Question number six, the use of technological channels in transmitting messages to a large audience is a feature of which of the following types of communication? A. Small group communication. B. Mass communication. C. Public communication. D. Interpersonal communication. Question number seven says, which of the following types of communication employ the channels of sight and sound? A. Intrapersonal and mass communication. B. Interpersonal and small group communication. C. Small group communication and mass communication. D. Mass communication and public communication. Question number eight, the type of communication where the speaker is required to conduct some research about the audience is dash. A. Mass communication. B. Small group communication. C. Interpersonal communication. D. Public communication. Question number nine, which among the following types of communication is structured as roles are assigned to participants of the group? A. Small group communication. B. Public communication. C. Mass communication. D. Interpersonal communication. Question number 10. Feedback is limited in one of the following options. A. Mass communication. B. Interpersonal communication. C. Small group communication. D. Interpersonal communication. Okay, now we'll go straight to the answers to all the questions. So please listen carefully to all the answers and mark the one that is right. Answer to question number 1 is A. Answer to question number 2 is A. Question number 3 is B. Question number 4 is D. Question number 5 is A. Question number 6 is B. Question number 7 is C. Question number 8 is D. Question number 9 is D. Question number 10 is D. Here is the assignment for this lesson. 1. Mention and explain the 5 types of communication. 2. Distinguish between the interpersonal communication and intrapersonal communication. 3. Explain why public communication requires research. 4. What makes the uses of communication different from purposes of communication. Many thanks for watching this video lesson on types of communication and their futures. Please remember to subscribe to this channel in case you have not done so. I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson. Thank you.